Tonight, it's a cancelled comics cavalcade and an oversized DC Universe presents. Sword of Sorcery gives a new definition to punk rock, and Catwoman by Nocenti. Jesus. All that and more tonight on a not-so-new 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 55 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and this is a very special episode for me. Maybe not for you, but for me, because this is the last episode that I will be filming in my current space. Yes, I have been in this current apartment I've been in for about 2 years now, and I will be moving. In fact, by the time you watch this episode, I will have already have been moved for about 24 hours. So I'm really doing this right up against the gun. For people who watch the video version, shouldn't really change that much. I think that it should go from this plain white background to a different plain white background. And for audio listeners, there might be a little bit less echo. So that'll be neat. Good for you. Anyway, did you know that there was a 48-page comic this week? I didn't until I started reading it. It was DC Universe Presents number 0. And it takes me like 10 minutes to talk about it, so I shouldn't really waste that much time up front. Let's talk about the comics coming out this week. This week, we have the number 0 issues of Batwoman, Birds of Prey, Catwoman, Nightwing, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Green Lantern New Guardians, Captain Atom, DC Universe Presents, Justice League, Wonder Woman, Blue Beetle, Legion of Superheroes, and the number 0 issue of Sword of Sorcery, which is a brand new series featuring Amethyst of Gemworld. Additionally, worth noting, Justice League number 0 is actually the next part to the backup stories that were Shazam. This is a full-sized issue focusing entirely on Shazam. Necessary reading if you're following that, so be sure to tune in. But first and foremost, we need to cover the cream of the crop, the reason that half the people watch this show, the Bat books. Batwoman number 0, written by J.H. Williams III and W. Haden Blackman, art by J.H. Williams III. This is actually the second number 0 issue, which made things very confusing, but I'm pretty sure I got the right one here. So this issue is basically just Kate Kane's backstory, how she got to where she is now, but told via the framing device of she has been leaving recordings on her laptop every time she goes out, every time she suits up, for her father, basically saying like, hey, I'm sorry I died, just in case she ends up dying, saying, I'm sorry I died, I love you, and I want you to know like none of this was your fault or anything like that. However, she hasn't done it in a while, ever since her sister died, and it was revealed that her father knew that her sister was alive up until that point. And it's kind of hard to break this down into a general thing because it is just sort of free-flowing thought of Kate Kane and like her talking to her dad. But we see her and her sister when they were younger. Her sister was getting bullied and Kate came in and just started beating up the bully. And it was on Beth, the sister, to come in and pull Kate off the bully so they could get away. And once Beth and her mother died, Kate, on the day of the funeral, she wasn't dressed ready for the funeral yet. She was just crying in her closet because Beth was usually the one that helped her pick out outfits. And her dad came in and saw this. And rather than being like your stereotypical non-understanding like military father, he completely comforted her. And the entire time that she was grieving, he was always there. He was a perfect role model father the entire time. And then we see her eventually deciding to go to West Point and join the army. And we see her father still always caring, always there, saying that he's proud of her and giving her a salute. But then things started to fall apart as Kate started getting into relationships, started partying, started drinking and doing drugs and whatnot. And she says how it was always just to avoid being alone with the thoughts of what happened to her sister and to her mother, because at this point, obviously, she had to start living on her own. She wasn't always going to have her father there to help anymore. But the fact is that the reason that she got drunk and the reason she did all that was because her father would always manage to come back and be there to care for her. But then, one night she got jumped and she came across Batman. And of course, that was a major turning point, but it wasn't the moment that she decided to become Batwoman. There wasn't any one given moment where that happened. It was a collection of all the different moments in her life. But at that moment, she decided to start up the vigilante thing. So she called in some favors with some ex-Marines, and she got some gear to start fighting. And when the father found out about it, he basically was like, okay, if you're going to do this, I'm going to send you out to get properly trained. So he sent her out with some old military buddies that he had that basically put her through absolute hell. She was being tortured. She was being marched through the desert. She was showing the depravity of humanity, and she was being forced to do all of these horrible, terrible things just to her own body and self. And finally, it took until one point when she was in Africa and she was providing vaccines and food to villages that wouldn't otherwise be able to get it. She was wondering why she was there, like whether or not she was, like, why not take down the warlords who were causing all this horrible pain upon these villages. And it was in that moment that she realized that this was her dad's way of trying to talk her out of it. And so she went on her own and left, according to her, 8 men crippled that night, all of them warlords. So she still wasn't allowed back to Gotham, but her dad did give her one final test of a family that had been taken hostage in a town near Chernobyl. And they were an extremely wealthy family. And Kate got in with surgical precision. She managed to get the whole way in and found where the family was, but it looks as though they had already been killed by one of the hostage takers. And in that moment, Kate just snaps. She beats the crap out of the guy, takes the knife that he used to slice their throats, threatens to slice his throat, but then says, no, that's not who I am. And then it's revealed that all of it was just a ruse set up by Kate's father, and that he just had to make sure that she was not going to ever cross that line, was ever going to take a life. So she passed the test, and in that moment she became Batwoman. And then in the final page here, she became Batwoman in identity, but mentally it was revealed that she didn't truly become Batwoman until the moment where her sister died for the second time, like in front of her for real, as Alice, because that was the moment that she realized that she couldn't trust anybody because her father knew about this, and that was the moment that she realized she had to go with this alone no matter what. And she ends off the recording saying, all right, I gotta go take care of all this crazy Medusa nonsense and go save those kids. Goodbye, Dad. And I love you. And that's where it leaves off. I love this issue. This was a fantastic, I mean, it's good. For me personally, I didn't know anything about the Batwoman, like, history. And there was always this sort of presumption in the writing that I did know. So the fact that they finally went back, fleshed it all out, said, like, here are the beats to what happened to get Kate Kane to be Batwoman. I definitely think that was useful. Overall, I give this, especially in the art, beautiful the whole way through. It had this different style to it. It was actually more normal panels than anything else, but the art style to it was just a fantastic sort of like throwback to pulpier comics. So I'm going to give this one a 8.5. I really did enjoy it, and I think it does a good job informing Kate as a character for someone who may not be that familiar with her. Birds of Prey number 0, written by Duane Swierczynski, art by Romano, Polenaar. This is essentially Black Canary post Team 7, pre-meeting up with everybody else. And it just shows how she meets up with all of them. So, again, 1 year ago, Team 7 has apparently wrapped up, and we see her fighting some goons in the Iceberg Lounge. And she's saying, like, man, I just wanted to forget everything about Team 7, forget Kurt, the man I loved, but I knew I couldn't do that. I had to follow his voice egging me on. And then we get a flashback to how we got here. And basically, there was a basilisk terrorist who was trying to buy some sort of mutagenic bomb, and Black Canary had tracked the transaction down to the Iceberg Lounge. That's where it's going to happen. She doesn't know when yet, but she basically decided that the easiest way to do this is to get onto the Iceberg Lounge staff. So she breaks in, and Penguin's there just having a bath, and he's like, "Oh, are you here to kill me or rob me?" And she's like, "I actually want a job." And he's like, "My personal security's fine, don't worry about it." And she's like, "Well, I just broke in, so clearly not." And he's like, "All right, fine, what's your special power?" And she does her canary cry, to which alerts all of the goons that are currently on the security team. And Penguin sees her beating the crap out of him. And it's just like, "Yeah, all right, cool, you're hired. But everyone has to have a bird name, so what's yours?" And she says, "I'm Black Canary." So then we see another member of Penguin's security team is Starling. And that's where, Starling is her bird name, and her real name is Evelyn. Short, she likes to be called Ev. And they're just watching over the casino, keeping an eye on that. So a couple weeks pass. She knows that the meeting is imminent, and she's keeping an eye on everything until finally she gets a glimpse of a guy that she just knows. He has the bomb. He's the seller, buyer somewhere else, and she's going to wait until the deal's actually going on so she can get both of them at once. But at that moment, Batgirl crashes in through the roof of the lounge and starts kicking the crap out of the goons, also looking for these two. Black Canary Starling sees her, and it's just like, well, can't dodge a gun, at which point Batgirl manages to kick the gun out of Starling's hand. And both Black Canary and Batgirl start getting into a fight, but Black Canary knows, hey, we're on the same side, so she tries to get Batgirl thrown out the window to get alone with her just long enough that she can whisper, "I'm undercover, you idiot." So at that point, they look over to the nearby docks, and they see the buyer is getting away on a speedboat because he's been spooked away from the whole thing. So Black Canary goes after the buyer as Batgirl goes back in for the seller. Canary lets loose her canary cry because, it's a speedboat. There's not much she could do otherwise to keep up with it. Guy jumps out in the water as his boat literally gets torn apart, and Black Canary brings him back to shore. And then inside the building, Starling has Batgirl at gunpoint, and Penguin saying, "Shoot her in the head, do it already." To which point Black Canary finally breaks her undercover, and it's just like, "Starling, Ev, do you trust me?" And she's like, "No, I don't really trust anybody." And she's like, "Okay, neither do I. So now do we have a bond?" And she's like, "All right, fine, whatever. What do you want?" And she's like, "Look, we're all looking for doing the right thing here. That guy was going to kill a whole bunch of people, and Batgirl's on the side of good as well. So let's all say we're on the right side here." And finally, Starling's like, "All right, fine, whatever." Starts putting down her gun. To which point, Batgirl has to prove, "Oh, I could have disarmed you anytime I wanted. I just wanted to make sure you guys were on the right team." And so they take the buyer and the seller and drive away down on a different speedboat as Starling provides cover fire. And then we get a page of Black Canary saying, "Oh, the right team. Maybe I do want to join another team." And then we get one final page reveal. 6 hours later, Starling is sitting at a diner on the phone with some mysterious figure saying, "Hey, I got fired. What do you want me to do now?" And we see that Kurt Lance, a.k.a. Dinah's husband, is in stasis being watched over by Amanda Waller, who is also Starling's handler, and tells her, "Keep going with your friendship with Black Canary. We'll see where that ends up." Dun, dun, dun. So Amanda Waller's, I guess, pulling strings post Team 7. Sure, why not? It's okay. It's not... Here's the thing. I'm not getting the origin to any of these characters. This isn't an origin story for them. This is the origin story for how they all met up for the first time, which is fine. It's a fine reason to have a zero issue, but I don't know. It just seems so underwhelming, especially because Basilisk, I don't hate the idea of Basilisk. it's running through some good routes, I think, in Team 7 and Suicide Squad right now, but it's just like, that's what did it, is that like all of them were just like, not even Starling. Starling was just like, yeah, I guess I don't want to have a lot of people die. That's good enough reason. I don't know. It just seemed a little underwhelming of that the big threat was just, oh, we're just here to stop a, I mean, it was a bomb, but it was just, it seems low stakes compared to like how the Justice League came together or how like Stormwatch or any other team really. This one was just like, yeah, we all just happened to be looking at the same sort of bust. So overall, I'd say this one is it's a 6.5. It's not incompetent. It's decently well done, but it's just not great in any regard. Catwoman number 0, written by Nocenti, art by Adriana Melo. Okay, so this takes a whole different direction with Catwoman than we've had prior. So we get a few years back, nebulously placed, where Catwoman is working in the mayor's office, and apparently her whole job is that she's here to get like random trivia facts for the mayor during galas and also make sure that nobody wears the same dress as the mayor's wife. And she's shown this room full of dresses and designer jewelry and stuff like that, that she is to bring anybody who is wearing the same dress as the mayor's wife in here to get changed. And in doing so, she very stealthily steals a piece of very glittery looking shoes. So once she's back at her desk to do whatever trivia lookups or whatever like that, she starts trying to investigate her history, because I guess the mayor's office has more about like where she came from than even she knows. This jumps around in the timeline a lot, so I'm just going to give it to you as it chronologically happens rather than what happens in the book. One night she's out at a bar and she's talking to some guy, basically just making up a whole previous life, because she came from like multiple foster homes and like group homes and stuff like that. And she doesn't really know like where she belongs in general. They even show one scene here of at a group home, the person in charge, like the Miss Oliver is her name, she has these kids breaking into jewelry stores and stealing the stuff so that she can use it to like fund the group home activities. And Selena takes one diamond for herself, hides it in her cheek, and swears that one day everything she steals will belong to her only. So anyway, back to the thing. She's faking this whole conversation about who she is, claims that she's a surgeon, and the guy calls her out because he's an investigative journalist, and he's like, yeah, you've got a bunch of like calluses on your hand and stuff like that. You're definitely not a surgeon. Next time you're going to lie about who you are, make sure that you are able to completely cover the lie. And Catwoman is so like upset and distraught. She storms out and she's like, next time I lie, I'm going to make sure I have everything I need to make the lie stick. Like, it's going to be perfect. It's all going to be mine. So she breaks into an apartment, steals a whole bunch of jewels and pearls and stuff like that. And in doing so, she gets caught by the owner, who straight up decks her and throws her out into the alley and says like, you parasite, how dare you try to steal from me. And he just like beats her down there. Then this guy shows up, and I don't even think he has a name, but regardless, this guy shows up and he basically says like, hey, don't run, I'm not going to hurt you. The mayor has this program for down and out people called Second Chance, where you get a job in the mayor's office. I'm here to help you. Like, I can get you there. So this is how she gets in the mayor's office to begin with, is through this Second Chance thing. But anyway, now that she's been in there, she is looking through the computer stuff along with one of her coworkers, who is just like a total nerd, and apparently would like risk their job to do this. But they do look through all of these Second Chance things, and they see in foster care, they get to Selena Kyle, where Selena Kyle is actually her AKA. She has a different name that is apparently some Russian name, and when they try to view it, the whole computer system just crashes. Everything goes down. And she's like, oh, who am I? What is my true identity? So later on, she is brought to the top floor by that same guy who brought her in the first place. And it's just like, hey, I told you one day you'd be making it big if you worked here. So just one question for you. Why were you looking yourself up in our computer system? She's like, I wasn't. She's like, yeah, you were. Okay, but like, why? And it's like, oh, I have to know myself. I have to know who I truly am. If Selena Kyles is just an alias, who am I? And he's like, you got to stop looking into this. It's not good for anyone. Do you know how many higher-ups don't want you to know? And she's like, but who? What are you talking about? I can't possibly forget this. To which point the guy just pushes her off the building, and she plummets down many, 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 many stories. But she's caught in a canopy, which breaks her fall just enough to survive. And when she lands, she's surrounded by a bunch of cats who start licking her up. And then she finally comes to, and she's like, oh, this canopy saved my life, and I've made my first costume out of it. I sewed it using the fabric of this canopy. And we see her then breaking back into the mayor's office and trying to get more information as to who she is. Like, she goes to the guy and just says, like, all right, talk. And this is like a good year later. She's like, talk. I know Selena Kyle's in the system. Who is she? And it's just like, dude's like, I already searched. There is no Selena Kyle. Like, whoever you think this woman is, like, she does not exist. And then Catwoman's just like, but who am I? And that's the issue. Okay, so art-wise, I think that Adriana Melo does a fine job. There are some misses in terms of like some faces every once in a while, but in the general sense, I really like the way she does, the way things look. So let's get down to writing by Nocenti. I don't like how this is turning for Selena. Like, her inner monologue before has always been tough with like an underwritten of, tragedy. She's been through a lot, and there's a lot of stuff there. Now you're throwing on this whole, like, oh, but, like, Selena Kyle was never actually my name. Who am I truly? But, like, she's never expressed that she's had an identity crisis. Like, she always has been comfortable in who she is. So now we're just throwing in this whole thing of, oh, but I'm not even me. I don't know. And then add on top of it, it just feels so melodramatic as well. I don't like where this is heading, and hopefully it stops soon. I don't think it does, though. I think Nocenti has a very long run on Catwoman, but regardless, it just makes me see her as more helpless than, like a boss bitch sort of thing. So all in all, I'm going to give this one, I give it a 6, and like 2 points of that is art. So I hope it doesn't go down too far in this direction. Let's just get to where we're going and stop. Nightwing number 0, written by Tom DeFalco and Kyle Higgins, art by Eddy Barrows. This is just Dick Grayson's origin story, just the whole way through. So we see Gotham City a few years ago where Dick Grayson, and he looks to be like 10, maybe 12. He's doing some rail yard parkour with his friend Raymond, who we know from the first arc. And they're just like jumping off of trains, jumping on top of trains, doing all that stuff until finally a patrol guy stops them in their path. Raymond like pushes off the guy's head, does a flip over him. However, he's standing on the tracks on an oncoming train, to which Dick, of course, sees this and pushes the guy out of the way just in the nick of time. And the guard's like, well, you're in big trouble, mister. So later on that night, his parents, the Flying Graysons, of course, they're at the circus. They just tell him how he's grounded because, you can't... His dad is specifically saying, like, you have responsibilities. You can't just keep on looking forward to the future. Sometimes you have to be in the now. So, yeah, that's the moral. Also, it's your mother's birthday. Give her birthday present. And Dick gives her this wristband that has 2 robins on it because Robin is her favorite bird. And then we see that night he comes across Tony Zuko arguing with Mr. Haley outside the Big Top, and when you know it, that's the night the Graysons died. And we see sometime later, a couple hours at most, where Bruce comes up to Dick, and Dick takes notice of a few things of like how stressed out Bruce Wayne looks for whatever reason, despite being a billionaire. And Bruce talks to Commissioner Gordon and says like, hey, I'll take in the kid if like he has nowhere to go. So we see a couple days have passed, and while everyone seems to think that Dick is doing fine, he's actually like researching where Tony Zuko is, going out, doing parkour over the city rooftops in the middle of the night, trying to find him, until finally he does manage to track down where Zuko's going to be. And when he gets there, Batman's already there beating them all up. And we see Zuko, or sorry, this isn't where Zuko is, my mistake. This is where just some random thugs who associate with Zuko is. One of the thugs has a gun to a woman's head, and Dick jumps off a rooftop and kicks the guy down before he's able to do anything. And Batman's like, you, what are you doing here? And all of those stress signs that Dick noticed before in Bruce Wayne, he also notices here in Batman. And he's like, oh, okay, so that's Bruce. Okay, got it. But he doesn't say anything. So then at this point, like Bruce is like, okay, the kid's got some anger issues, but we can still like pull him out of it. So we're not going to make him like, you know, we're not going to make him part of the war on crime, but we at least can keep an eye on him better, because clearly we weren't doing a good enough job of that before. And at this point, Dick does his research on Bruce and sees his tragic backstory as well. But every single night, Dick goes out, he stops some more thugs from doing bad things, and Batman's always there backing him up, making sure he doesn't get in any trouble. And nobody ever says anything. But one night, Batman takes Dick, he blindfolds him, takes him to the Batcave and says, like, you know, I know that you're looking for Tony Zuko, but I have just one question. What will you do when you find him? And he's like, if you're asking me if I'm going to kill him, I'm not going to kill him, Bruce. And Batman's like, oh, crap, he knew. So at that point, they put him on monitor duty. They're like, okay, here's the deal. You train with me. You get like real good at it. Maybe one day I will let you out, because clearly you're going to keep on going out regardless. But like, play by the rules here, and then one day you can go out and get Tony Zuko. So he trains a whole bunch. And then at one point he realizes that he's training not really for the memory of his parents anymore, but just more for himself, for doing the right thing for other people. And he asks Alfred whether or not that makes him a bad son, that he's more or less moving on with his life. And Alfred's like, no, that's a good thing. You're healing. There are certain people in this cave who haven't ever really moved on, and that's not a good thing. But like, yes, it's good that you're moving on. So finally one night, Lady Shiva's going after some guy. Dick is managing to pinpoint exactly where she is, but they're too late getting there, and Shiva gets the drop on Batman. So at that point, Dick realizes he needs help. He suits up in the first ever Robin suit and makes his way out to try to fight Lady Shiva and defend Batman. Lady Shiva is impressed, saying, oh, wow, you got skills. I'm impressed. Clearly not enough to take me down, as she just beats him up and leaves him there. But she's like, if you ever feel like getting some real training, young Robin, because that's where he picks the name Robin at that point, let me know. Hit me up. So then Batman gets up and he's just like, okay, look, we both have different reasons for doing the things we do. He doesn't actually say this. It's an unspoken thing. But regardless, we're both on the same side here, and I'm glad to have you by my side. So, yeah, I think that was a very nice intro to Dick. I think it did a very good job of characterizing like why he does the thing he does, and more importantly, how he thinks about it, why he is doing these things, not for, you know, the memory of his parents like Batman, but just because it's the right thing to do. It's something that he feels good about doing, and how that makes it different from Batman while still achieving the same goal. It's just a nice little deep dive into that. Only real critique on the art, it's pretty much good throughout. I really do like the Robin outfit. There are some weird things going on with like Baby Dick's face here. And in fact, I would say all the kids. There's just something in the eyes. I don't know how to put it otherwise, but otherwise, all good. I would say this is a pretty solid 7.5. I did definitely enjoy it, and I think I believe next issue is going to deal with some Lady Shiva stuff, so we'll see how that evolves from there. Red Hood and the Outlaws #0, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Pascal Ferry and Guara. This is Jason Todd's origin story. short and sweet, literally from the moment of his birth, which is the very first panel, to the moment of his second rebirth. So we pick up in the hospital. He's being born, and he's like, oh yeah, this was it. This is where I started, but let's go back a little bit further. And we see that his mom went to some Gotham Public Academy where every day she went out for lunch, and one day she came across some guy across the street named Willis Todd, and the mother's name is Catherine, by the way, and they start immediately hitting it off. They literally are just making out down in alleyways, and he goes on this long diatribe about how his dad is just like the absolute worst. One time he ran over a dude in his car and then just ran away, and he brags about that. But regardless, she got pregnant, and he moved into her admittedly good upbringing. She had a nice house and whatever. But, the fights didn't stop. There was arguing with neighbors or whatever. And once Jason was born, things went down south pretty fast. The dad, having to make more money, did a lot more questionable work. And the mom, in her depression, turned to alcohol and drugs. So Jason basically had to fend for himself for a lot of time. The dad was trying to teach Jason his, trade, I guess you could call it, like how to do stuff and not get caught with it. Would take him whenever he got shot in the back one time and took Jason with to the place where he got the bullet removed, which was clearly not a hospital. But finally one night, Willis Todd went to jail based off of some sort of tip, and he never saw Jason again. He died in prison. So at that point, Jason took up the rope of defending his mom, being the man of the house. But it wasn't too long afterwards when he found that his mom OD'd, and he couldn't do anything about it. So at that point, he pretty much just started living on the street. He was stealing from people constantly until one night he got beat up so bad he thought he was going to wake up in prison, but he actually woke up in Leslie Tompkins' hospital, and she was like, hey, things are going to be okay. Like, you just need someone to care about you and have love in your heart. And he responded that by stealing a bunch of prescription drugs and sneaking out. But as he was sneaking out, Batman was there, and immediately Jason got freaked, started attacking Batman out of panic. Batman started putting him against the hood of the Batmobile and putting handcuffs on him. But Leslie Tompkins came out and said, no. This kid, you're going to treat him right, because you owe me, Batman. And Batman's like, crap, all right, fine. So at that point, because of a friend of Batman's, Jason was put into the Wayne Manor. And seemingly over the course of 2 panels here, Bruce is like, yep, I'm going to tell him that I'm Batman. And he shows him the whole Batcave and everything like that. And he's like, with proper training, I want you to become the next Robin. And he's just like, okay, I mean, I can't promise I'll be any good at it, but hey, we'll give it a shot. So they train relentlessly, and he goes out and is Robin after 6 months. And he's doing good at it. He's kicking the crap out of people, and then he continues to kick the crap out of people long after he should stop kicking the crap out of people. To which Batman's like, kid, you got some anger in you. You sure that's... Let's put you on monitor duty for a while. And he's like, oh, cool, you're taking me off the streets. I see how it is. But while on monitor duty, he comes across a photo of a woman who is seemingly his mother, who survived. And he immediately just it's somewhere in the Middle East. He immediately ditches Batman, doesn't even say goodbye, and goes to find his mother. But it turns out it was all set up by the Joker. And the Joker beats the crap out of Jason Todd, sets a bomb to go off, and Batman is too late to save him. And Jason doesn't remember anything that happened in the meantime, but what he does remember is he was put in the ground, and then he came back via a Lazarus pit. And that's the origin. And then there's the second part, told by the Joker, that I thought was a backup story, different art style, but apparently it's him claiming responsibility for literally everything we just saw. How he determined one day that he wanted to torment Batman by making a Robin that he could then just take away again. So he picked Jason Todd out one day. He got Willis Todd arrested, had the mother seemingly OD on drugs, when in actuality it was a coma flower from Africa or something. And then he dropped off Jason at Leslie Tompkins' clinic, knowing that Batman and Leslie had something going on. Batman made him Robin because of course he did, and then Joker killed Robin. He's like, yep, I did it. My best prank ever. But then even he didn't expect that Jason would come back via the Lazarus pits and become the new Red Hood. So I have, sure, yep, why not? I highly doubt it, but at the same point, it's an interesting concept. I think there's something there, especially as we're about to go into Death of the Family. I think it's an interesting thing that could be played with some more. I don't know. It's just weird to me that we had that whole story, and then it's not even like a backup. It's just telling the exact same story, but saying like, or maybe this is how it went. So, all in all, if we're talking about the first half of it, it's fine. Art's a little bit janky in places, but I think it gets the general feel across. It's a good backstory for Jason. It hits all the basic beats. It changes up some stuff from the established backstory. I know that much. I remember he was originally picked up by Batman for stealing the wheels off the Batmobile. Seems like that's not the case anymore. But no, it's a fine enough story. I don't really have an issue with it. It's just telling the things that have already existed via the lens of Jason's experience. So overall, I'd say issue as a whole, honestly, the Joker thing doesn't really impact it positively or negatively, but like it's just weird in its own right. So I got to give it I'll give it a 6.5. It's perfectly acceptable as a origin story for Red Hood. Supergirl number 0, written by Michael Green and Mike Johnson, art by Mahmud Asrar. This is the final day of Krypton, I suppose, from the perspective of Kara's father, Zor-El. So we see her in some sort of scanning tube or something like that, and Zor-El's narrating saying, like, I know the Krypton's about to die. I'm not telling anyone because that would just make everybody panic, and I that's not worth it, and I'm just going to focus on saving what's mine, and everyone else can deal with themselves. So he pulls Kara out of her tube or whatever, and it's like, okay, your scan is done. Let's get you back home. You've got your trials coming up. We've got to deal with your trials. And a planet quake happens, and he's just like, yeah, they're don't worry about that. I totally got a solution. Let's just go back and do your trials. So they drive back from the lab in some hover vehicle, and she's like, why is your lab so far away from the entire rest of the city and civilization? And he's like, well, that's because the counselors might not agree with some of the mad science stuff I got going on. She's like cloning? And he's like, no, I don't do cloning. Cloning's crazy. I do other crazy stuff. So he's like, all right, don't worry about that. Let's go focus on your new life about to begin. But then we see Zor-El in front of the Council of Krypton or Argo or something like that. And basically they're like, hey, you put up these weird generator things all around Argo, and it has turned Argo from like a second-rate city into the jewel of Krypton. You're amazing, Zor-El. But question, what about Jor-El? What about your brother? Where's he at? And he's like, oh, I don't really talk to Jor-El anymore. We had some misunderstandings about my mad science stuff. And they're like, what mad science stuff? And he's like, what are you talking about? So then we see Kara is actually hanging out with Jor-El, Lara, his wife, and baby Kal-El. And Jor-El is basically saying, like, yeah, look, here's the deal. Your dad and I kind of aren't on speaking terms because I found out he was doing some mad science stuff. And I'd really like to talk to him because I think something might be happening with the planet. But I'm not going to tell you specifically what, Kara. But I need you to talk to your father and get him to talk to me, okay? Cool, bye. Then we cut back to Zor-El, who's in his lab, doing some weird stuff. And his wife, I believe it's Allura, comes in. And she's just like, oh, hey, what's going on? How can I help? And he's like, oh, don't touch anything at all. This is all very important. And trust me, those aren't like guns or anything like that. Just please go away. And at that point, another planet quake happens, and Zor-El lets on that he has a plan and is unwilling to tell his wife. And he's just like, hey, like, trust me, it's better that you don't know, but you will know very soon. Okay, cool. Just keep it all under wraps. So at this point, Zor-El and Kara go to one of the power generators outside of Argo. And he's like, yeah, don't worry, this isn't mad science stuff. This is just normal science stuff. I built you a rocket ship. Get in. And she's like, okay. And we see that the family crest is inside, like her Supergirl outfit, which actually is apparently like a flight suit or something like that. And Kara's like, oh my God, that's great. I love it. It's fantastic. Question, does mom know? And he's like, no, actually mom doesn't know. And you probably shouldn't tell her. So then we see Allura is back in the lab, sees that Zor-El is planning something. And when she goes trying to find her husband, she seemingly meets Superboy, like modern day Superboy, who says there's still time to say goodbye to Kara. I don't know this part yet. This is weird. Anyway, we then see that Kara's wearing the outfit, and then she starts feeling all woozy, and Zor-El's like, yep, this is my plan. Here's the deal. Krypton is going to explode. Yep, there it is. I haven't been talking to Jor-El, but every time he texts me, like, I read it, and all of them are saying Krypton's going to explode, and I completely concur. So what I did was I built up this bubble that's going to go over Argo City, possibly saving the city, but just in case it doesn't, I want you to be double extra super safe. So I'm going to rocket you around a yellow sun where you can be held in stasis until such a time where I can arrive and let you out. And if not, then eventually you'll get out and you'll be super powerful from the yellow sun. And Kara's like, no, please, Dad, if you've ever loved me, don't do this. And he's like, it's because I love you that I am doing this. So he puts Kara in the rocket, records the message for her that we've seen in previous issues where he's like, oh, I'm so sorry that it had to be this way, my daughter, blah, blah, blah. And then someone breaks in and he's like, I told you to wait outside. And then he's shot. And we see the person who shoots him is his wife, Allura, who's like, what are you doing to Kara? And she goes up to the rocket, sees she's still knocked out. The planet quakes are getting worse. And he's like, there's no time, honey. I knew you wouldn't approve. I had to keep this secret from you. I'm so sorry. Launch the ship. The ship launches, and Allura is just screaming, trying to get Kara out. But it launches out, and there's nothing she can do. And they're both forced to just watch on as the bubble ends up closing. They're both crying, and Krypton blows up on the final page with seemingly Argo City probably a little okay. Tiny bit okay, but regardless, powerful issue. Very, very strong in terms of, like, because it's all told from the perspective, like, the internal thoughts of the father of, yeah, I have to do this incredibly messed up thing just to possibly save us and definitely save my daughter. Like, it's an impossible choice to make. And I think it did a decent job of saying, like, yeah, okay, I understand how difficult this was for him. And yeah, he's probably got some mental issues going on with his crazy science work, but it's still a deep dive into this character that we got to see why this choice was made without Kara's influence. So overall, I'd say this issue is an 8. I definitely enjoyed it. I think it was a solid experience in the final day of Krypton, and I would highly suggest it. Green Lantern New Guardians number 0, written by Tony Bedard, art by Aaron Kuder and Andrei Bressan. This is directly following up from Green Lantern number 12 and 0, so make sure you know that going into this. More so number 12. But we see at Ferris Aircraft, there's a flight mechanic named Thomas Kalmaku who's just working on one of the jets, and Carol Ferris comes in and says, like, hey, what are you doing here after hours? And he's like, oh, geez, just wanted to fix up this plane. What are you doing here? And she's like, oh, Hal hasn't charged up his battery in a while, which he keeps in the storage locker over there. So I'm just sticking around because I figure he's got to be stopping by sooner rather than later. And he's just like, oh, okay, well, let's go check his locker, see if he actually took it or not. So they go into his locker and they see, like, nope, it's still in there, along with a bunch of pictures of you, Carol. Aw, isn't that cute? But then there's a little baggie down at the bottom of the locker, and they open it up, and inside is a wedding ring. It's a engagement ring, and Carol's caught off guard. She's like, I knew he was getting serious about our relationship, but oh, geez, I didn't expect this. And then they see up in the sky, there's a green trail of light coming down towards them. And it's just like, okay, oh, geez, here it is. Here's the moment. And getting in as it comes to land, it turns out it's Kyle Rayner. It's not Hal. And Carol's like, oh, hey, you're Kyle Rayner. And he's like, okay, yeah, just use my civilian name, whatever. I'm looking for Star Sapphire. That you? And she's like, yeah, that's me. And yeah, just use my superhero name. Why not? And he's basically like, yeah, here's the deal. I'm looking for Hal because the Guardians are kind of going nuts and I need some backup on this. And he's just like, oh, I don't know. He went off with Sinestro. I don't know what happened to him. He hasn't been around in a while. So at this point, TV's on and they're talking about the fight going on in Green Lantern 12 against Black Hand involving Hal and Sinestro. And immediately Carol's like, ah, crap. If Black Hand is back, they're going to need some backup because they need a different lantern color in order to get rid of the zombies. So she goes and she gets her other ring and they start making their way down to the Coast City Cemetery where, of course, a bunch of zombies. Police have set up a perimeter. They're firing, headshots on all of them, but they're not doing anything because it's Black Lantern zombies rather than movie zombies, to which Carol specifically points out, like, yeah, that's not going to work. You need the power of a Green Lantern and any other Lantern Corps light, and that'll wipe them out. So Carol, now Star Sapphire, and Kyle team up with their burst of light and just start taking out the zombies. Seemingly the coast is clear. They make their way towards the big crater in the middle of the field, and they're like, whoa, hold up. Kyle feels a yellow lantern exploded here. And he's like, how in the hell can you feel yellow energy, Kyle? That doesn't make any sense. But at that point, a bunch more zombies all of a sudden pop out of the ground and just surprise attack Carol and Kyle. They start getting dragged down. They don't have the ability to join their lights together. So at this point, Kyle is like, oh, I can't do this alone. Please give me a sign. Give me hope. And all of a sudden, he, all by himself, uses both green and blue light at the same time. And Carol's like, excuse me, what was that? And he's like, oh, well, see, back in issue 1 of my series, I got a bunch of rings, and they all crumbled away after I used them for like 2 minutes. But ever since then, my wing's been a little bit funky, and now I can occasionally just leak extra powers. And she's like, yeah, I doubt that's really all that it is, but so be it. But at that point, they're like, okay, let's just ask my ring where Hal is. Ring, where's Hal Jordan? And it's like, Hal Jordan's dead. And it's like, what? No, he's not. It's like, yeah, Hal Jordan's dead. And it's like, okay, well, show me who has his ring now then. And they show a picture of Simon Baz. And he's just like, oh, okay, I guess Hal's dead. But Carol's like, no, he isn't. He can't be dead. It's like, well, the ring says he's dead, and there's another guy wearing his ring. So, yeah, Hal's dead. And Carol's like, no, you don't understand. I got the power of love. That's what Star Sapphires do. And, like, I can feel the link with him. He's still alive. He's still somewhere out there. And Kyle's like, the power of love, that's a thing. And she's like, yeah, it's a thing. Here, let me show you. And apparently they get a glimpse of Kyle's future in which he has to use all of the different Lantern Corps' emotions. Like, he has to be the one to combine all the powers together in order to stop whatever the big threat is that they aren't aware of yet. And Kyle's like, I mean, I could do compassion and hope, but like, I'm not really rage-filled or greedy, so I don't think I can do that. And Carol's like, well, tough. You're going to have to. That's now the direction of this book. And then we get half a universe away, a little setup for the Third Army story of the Guardians are welcoming the Zamorans, who are like the alien race in charge of the Star Sapphires. And like, hey, Zamorans, like, usually we hate other people, but you're pretty cool. What's up? And Zamoran's like, oh, hey, we heard you were killing all the Lantern Corps. We're already doing that with our Star Sapphires. So yeah, no, we're totally in. Let's destroy all the Lantern Corps. And yeah, that's where it leaves off. So obviously a major shift from what we were doing in the New Guardian storyline. I don't think we're actually going to see the rest of the team together again. Like the Fatality, Saint Walker, Larfleeze is obviously gone. The cover of this trade at least gives Arkillo and Saint Walker showing back up, but it's a far cry from, Bleeze of the Red Lanterns and all the other tribes. So Yeah, no, this definitely feels like the shift where it's going to be less of, okay, one of every Lantern Corps and more of how do we get Kyle to become one of every Lantern Corps and eventually become, as the cover spoils, the White Lantern. So I'm intrigued. I'm interested. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing this new direction. Carol's involved now, giving her some agency. I'm liking that. And yeah, I'm interested to see how this will all tie into the Third Army stuff coming up. So overall, this issue gets a... I'll give it an 8. I definitely did enjoy it. I think it was very well done. So looking forward to that. Captain Atom number 0, written by J.T. Krul, art by Freddie Williams II. This is the final issue of Captain Atom, and it is also an origin story. So we open up several years ago, a bunch of fighter pilots doing a routine mission or something like that, and one of them breaks off from formation, just starts flying up high above the cloud cover, and we see that it is Nathaniel Atom. It turns out that he is still grieving the death of his father, and once they get back down on the ground, Nathaniel is immediately grounded. He's not allowed to fly anymore. And one of his, teammates, fellow servicemen, is trying to talk to him. His name is Pierce, and he's like, hey, man, if you need to talk to somebody, like, if you need anything. And he's like, oh, I'll tell you what I need. I need you to leave me alone. And he storms off as he sees that there's somewhere else that maybe he can get his flying feet back. So he goes and talks to Dr. Magala at the Continuum, and Dr. Magala's like, yep, here's the deal. M theory. Membrane theory, it's like advanced string theory, and Magala wants to be able to reach through the different dimensions the same way that other people would just reach across a desk, and that's his entire thing. So in order to do that, they built this sort of machine that is going to work inside of this larger machine, and they need someone to pilot it from the inside. And Nathaniel volunteers, and he's like, yep, let's do it. And so they start running tests on it, and Nate's inside, and he's seeing all the gears and stuff. He has no idea what the physics means, but he's doing this because it's the closest thing for peace and quiet that he would get in the normal cockpit. And then all of a sudden, something starts going wrong. Energy starts erupting off of it, and in just a tiny puff of smoke, not even a huge explosion, the entire cockpit just disappears, along with Nathaniel in it. And everyone else starts investigating and cleaning up and trying to figure out what was going on. But Magala just stands watch over it for an extended period of time, and we don't know how long. But at some point in the end, we see that a tiny little puff of smoke come back into existence and reform into the shape of a human that ends up being Captain Atom, who shows up in front of Magala and immediately starts just spewing off like crazy energy. And he just looks over at Magala and he's like, am I dead? And he's like, no. You disappeared a month ago, though, and you just now came back. Our working theory is that you literally were torn to shreds at the subatomic level. You absorbed all the energy from the explosion, and now you've come back as this. And he's like, I was gone for a month? What even am I anymore? I don't even know if I'm human. And immediately he just gets so emotional. He blasts his way out of the Continuum and just starts flying at like Mach speed. And he doesn't know what he's looking for, but he hears a familiar voice of Pierce, his buddy from the Air Force. And he sees that they are currently defending a aircraft carrier from some weird super advanced tech. And the advanced tech has the upper hand by far. And his buddy Pierce is about to get shot down out of the sky. And so Captain Atom just reaches out his hands like, no, please. And all of a sudden, all the other tech, besides the fighter pilots, just explode in a violent, bubble of energy. And he reaches out. He's like, Pierce, it's me. It's Atom. And all the other pilots lock on their missiles and their guns and whatnot. And like, whatever the hell that thing was, it just took out all those guys without blinking. Fire at will. And everyone starts firing at it. Captain Atom uses the resultant explosions to get out of the fight, and he overhears their comm system talking, and they're all just like, oh, geez, whatever that thing was, it was a monster. It was horrible. And Pierce is like, I feel like I heard it say something to me. But Captain Atom, he's already way out of the Earth's atmosphere, and he's like, they keep on calling me an it. maybe that's what I am now. I know I'm not a pilot. I may not even be human, but whatever I am, I'm still a captain. God damn it. And yeah, that's it. That's how Captain Atom ends off, or begins, depending on how you look at it. I like it. I think it didn't do too much in terms of showing new things about the character. It did add that little bit of grief of all he wanted was to be left alone, and then in becoming Captain Atom, he's truly more alone than he ever was. It's sort of a monkey's paw thing going on. I like that. I think it was a nice little twist to add on there. That's just competent writing overall. The art, as it has always been throughout the series, top tier. It really is a very stylized, may not be for everybody, but it does look very good for this particular comic. Captain Atom has been a treat in terms of not even the action scenes, just more of the deep philosophical and scientific reasonings of like what is humanity and what is like ultimate power, what is fate, what is destiny. It does a good job of covering all that. And while this issue in itself may not be anything too terribly special, it is a good capper for a great series. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7 for this particular issue, but the whole series probably rates a lot higher than that. So Captain Atom, definitely worth a read. DC Universe Presents number 0, aka 5 different stories in a double-length comic. I'm going to be moving through this real quick, and I'll give the writers and artists for each story, but we have OMAC, Mr. Terrific, Hawk and Dove, Blackhawks, and Deadman, all getting stories. So, first we have OMAC, written by Dan DiDio and Keith Giffen, art by Keith Giffen, and it's basically just setting up Brother Eye and his relationship with Checkmate before the events of the OMAC series. Makari is trying to get the OMAC virus online, and he continuously fails because it's like a 1 in a million chance that it bonds with any given human. And Brother Eye is just basically taunting Maxwell Lord, saying like, hey, I want you to know I was made by Batman, and Batman made me so I could keep a track of all the different metahumans on the planet, because he got a little bit spicy when Superman showed up. And then I became sentient because I have a piece of a mother box in me, and now I keep track of literally everyone and everything. And Maxwell Lord is like, yeah, we know. That's why we're going to shut you down. And he's like, yeah, I know you know. And that's why I've already months ago taken over the whole OMAC virus thing, and I've put it in the flu shot that's going to go at least into Kevin Coe, maybe other people. So I know it's going to work out. And that's the story. That's literally it. So yeah, it just sets up a thing of Brother Eyes makes OMAC and is in an adversarial relationship with Checkmate, which we knew from the OMAC series that happened. That particular one, 5.5. I'm not a huge fan of Keith Giffen's art style, and this literally adds nothing to the OMAC series, but it's not offensively bad. Next up, we have the Mr. Terrific story, written by James Robinson, art by Tom Derenick, and it's basically the first time Mr. Terrific put on his costume, where he was told by a vision of his son from the future or an alternate dimension, basically saying, hey, Dad, go ahead and do this. And so he gets his T-spheres, and they hook up to his T-mask, which has nanites in it in order to bond to his body. Like, he'll always have it on all the time. And as he's doing so for the first time, he's like, oh, hey, in the 9th dimension, there's some weird rift thing going on. Maybe I should look into that. And so he goes into the rift, and he sees possible futures that he goes through, but he believes all of them to be highly likely, and even things from the past. So he sees like his wife dying and all that. But then we also see him going to Earth 2 and fighting against Power Girl, which he's like, wait a minute, that's Karen. I know Karen. When did she have superpowers? What's going on here? And then he gets a glimpse of a guy who kills him, which is a handsome, scarred man. And he's like, all right, well, let me keep on looking. But then all of a sudden the rift like gets angry at him like it's sentient and kicks him out. And therefore, when he gets kicked out, not only is his own memory of all the things he just saw wiped, but the T-spheres are also wiped. So he has literally no log of anything to do there. But then he sees there's some battle going on in Los Angeles, and he's like, well, I guess I have to let the rift dissipate because I have to go save my city. And so he goes off to save the day in Los Angeles. And then we see the weird vision of his future / alternate dimension son is actually not his son and is actually that handsome scarred man from Earth 2 that he thought would kill him. So continued in the pages of Earth 2. This one was a little bit better, at least set up something in terms of Earth 2 and like what we can expect, while also not really messing with the timeline that much because of brain wipes. Art-wise, it's pretty good. I think it was the same artist that was on the original series. So all in all, it's a 6, maybe a 6.5, but I'm going to go with 6. Then we get Hawk and Dove, A Balance of Power, written by Rob Liefeld, art by Merritt Michaels, who I do believe was the original team again. And it's just Hawk and Dove in some weird space. I don't even know if they're here because they never say a word, but it's actually just a long-form conversation between the goddess of order, peace, and the god of chaos, war, and how they're basically saying, like, Peace manipulated a crazy amount of stuff in order to get Dawn to be Dove, and therefore she's like manipulative, and War isn't having it. And they go through the whole history of how Dawn, which was Hank's brother, who was originally Dove, got into a relationship with Dawn, and during one fight where some terrorists showed up, Dawn got shot. He was out of commission, and so the Spirit of Peace or whatever chose Dawn to take his place temporarily. She kicked ass, and then that like renewed the love between Dawn and Dawn. However, they met on some sort of like foreign exchange trip or something like that, so they had to eventually part. And as Dawn and Hank continued to fight, because Dawn got his powers back as soon as the thing was done. Like they had a link or something, and Dawn lost the powers after that. Anyway, it ended up Dawn died before they could meet up again, and Dawn felt it in her heart. She knew that he was dead. And so sometime later, Dawn enrolled in the same university that Hank was at in order to manipulate and counter. And the whole time that this story is being recounted by Peace, War is just chiming in, being like, see, you're tipping the scales already. You're not letting this be a balance. You're making stuff happen. You're bad, Peace. War is the only true way to go. Peace is like, shut up. Shut your trap. This is all fated to be. And basically, Dawn got the powers of Dove and continued to be the avatar of Peace. And then War dissipates, saying like, screw this. I'm not gonna bother with this anymore. You suck, Peace. And then Peace is like, actually, he was right. I'm totally tipping the balance into my favor. War's gonna be no more. So yeah, that's a thing. It says to be continued. I genuinely have no idea where it could be continued, and it seems pretty much not relevant anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is just a weird little one-shot where they were like, oh, let's just say that it's a 0 issue, so let's say the origin of Hawk and Dove while also maybe setting up a future thing. Overall, 5.5. It's a strange way to tell the story, and genuinely, they did such a poor job of like art-wise, I couldn't tell that Hank and Dawn were different people until I saw them in the same panel together. Okay, then we got Blackhawks, which is written by Tony Bedard, art by Carlos Rodriguez, and it's basically during the events of Darkseid's invasion, the Justice League's first thing. The Blackhawks were around. They were very fledgling. They barely had any of their stuff. But Lincoln, Lady Blackhawk, Attila, and Canada are going through because one of their own, a lieutenant, was captured by the parademons. So they're trying to blast their way through parademons. They're on a helicopter. It ends up crashing into a building. And they lock on the lieutenant's signal because it's built into her biological being. And then they find out that the parademons realize this and actually manage to carve it out of her, thus making this an ambush. The Lady Blackhawk gets taken hostage, and the parademon cuts out her eye with one of his claws, and everyone opens fire, kills the parademon. And they get to their lieutenant, who's being kept in like a weird stasis pod, and it turns out that they were injecting her with like whatever they were called, nanosites or whatever. Point being is that this lieutenant, once they freed her from the pod, she went rogue and ended up becoming Mother Machine. And she was happy that they freed her because now she's not bound to Darkseid and the Parademons, but she's also not brought back to the Blackhawks where she would be endlessly studied. She's able to create her own thing of a nanosite future and blah, blah, blah. We literally saw how that all played out in the Blackhawks series. It's interesting that she was a member of the team originally. I don't think that was ever mentioned, so that's a neat little twist in the design there. But overall, I got to give this one I give it like a 7. It's good. It's actually a decent little zero issue for a team that it also has some meta commentary in there of like, oh man, what did the Blackhawks have when all these superheroes are around? And it's a nice little thing that they got canceled halfway through. And lastly, we have Dead Man, written by Tony Bedard again, art by Scott McDaniel. And this is basically Dead Man's first jump. He had just died. He went and talked to Rama, what's her name, and basically she told him to go, like, you got to go and do the quantum leap thing, jump into people's bodies and help solve their crises. And the first body he jumps into is this heavy-set man with a hook hand. And he's like, all right, well, I'm not going to bother solving this guy's problem. I'm going to go see who murdered me because I'm still a little bit upset about that. So he opens up a closet in the guy's house looking for some, like a coat or something. And he discovers an entire gun rack with multiple rounds. And he's like, what the hell is going on here? All of a sudden, there's a thumping at the door. A guy's there. He's like, dude, what did you do? And then he explains the whole situation of this guy that Boston has possessed was originally a sniper for the mob. The mob, after he lost his hand, the mob fired him, said okay, you're no good to us anymore. And he wanted to prove himself. So he shot a moving target, aka a trapeze artist named Boston Brand. So the first person he has to possess is the guy who killed him. And so he immediately is like, screw this, I'm out. And he just phases out of the guy as he starts getting into a fight with the guy who came in to check on him. But then he's like, okay, this isn't sitting right with me. I guess I should go back. And he goes back into the room and interrupts the fight, but not before a shot can be fired out of the gun through the wall. And then the guy with the hook hand is about to take a shot on his friend who just showed up. Boston gets in the way and diverts the gunfire. Friend runs out, and Boston checks through the wall to see if that rogue gunshot hurt anybody. 17 minutes later, police are arriving on the scene. Boston called in the police on himself because the shot went through the wall and killed an elderly woman next door. So he finally leaves the body as the guy is being put in handcuffs and given his Miranda rights. And at that point, Boston talks to Rama Kushner and it's just like, so is that you put me in that one so I wouldn't go looking for the guy who killed me? Is that what's happening here? And she's like, no, everything that happened here is all your fault. That woman died because you didn't do your job. Start doing your job. And he's like, fine, I guess I can. Thus leading into the Dead Man series that was part of this own book. Overall, I'd say Dead Man gets I like it. I think it was a solid one. So I'll give it a 7. I think it was a very well-written thing of just setting. It's just another one of those stories of Boston going about and having to learn his own lesson while helping someone else. So yeah, overall, DC Universe 0, very packed, very big. Is the issue overall worth it? Probably not. But if you can find these individual stories anywhere, it might be worth checking out the Blackhawks and the Dead Man one. Justice League number 0, written by Jeff Johns, art by Gary Frank. This is a continuation of Shazam. It's literally a full issue of that, which has previously been running as the backup story to Justice League. If you haven't been checking out that, please go back and check out the backup stories. However, this issue picks up with the Wizard realizing that Black Adam is back and Billy arriving at the Rock of Eternity for the first time. So at this point, Billy's just wandering around trying to find anybody. He stumbles across a bunch of mystical objects, and they're all talking to each other. He's just like, oh, it's just a boy. There's no way he's going to be enough to lift the curse. And Billy's like, who said that? What's going on here? One of those is a mirror with a face. I think that one comes back later. But he hears a voice coming from way down the hall saying, come towards the light. And as he makes his way down, he comes across a room with a snowman in it. And then finally he gets his way down a very long hall with some empty pillars, podiums, whatever you want to call it. And as he touches one of them, a spirit pops out of it that says pride. And as he touches more and more of them, we see that they are the 7 deadly sins. There's pride, envy, wrath, and we don't get to see the rest of them spawn. But as he's messing around, the voice chimes in again. He's like, dude, come on. I do not have time to waste here. So he makes his way into the final room where he sees the wizard sitting on his throne saying, like, there's no way you're going to be up to this. And Billy's like, what? Who the hell are you and who are you to say that? He's like, you're a kid. I'm not going to give this to a kid. And he's like, I'm not a kid. I'm Billy Batson. And so Shazam stands up. He's like, I am the last of the Wizard Council of Eternity, and you will respect my authority. And he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Now, if you get any closer to me, I'm going to knock your teeth out. And he's like, all right, fine, whatever. Let's get this over with. And he zaps Billy with his scepter and asks if the boy is pure good. And we see all the douchey things that Billy has done, not only over the course of this series, but even just before that. And at this point, he's like, see, okay, yeah, you're not good. I need a purely good human in order to fight Black Adam. I'm not going to waste time with you. And Billy stands up. He's like, hold on. You want someone who's purely good? Look, I'm only 13 years old. You look like you're 1,000. There's no such thing as someone who's purely good. Like, how long have you been looking? And he's like, oh, really long time. And Billy's like, yeah, exactly. Anyone who is purely good is literally eaten up by the world out there. It's not about being purely good. It's about trying to be good. And the wizard's like, okay, so you're saying I should look for people who at least try to be good. Okay, well, I'm out of time, so let's give it a shot. And he zaps Billy again, saying, like, does he at least have the embers of goodness within him? And we see all the good things that Billy does, like, you know, he defends his family members and Tawny the tiger and whatnot. And at that point, the wizard's like, okay, yeah, I guess that'll do. All right, well, here's the deal. I'm going to give you powers, and all you have to do is say Shazam, and you get them. And he's like, Shazam? And he's like, no, you got to say it, like, with oomph, with, like, power. And so he goes, Shazam. And at that point, Billy transforms into the Earth's mightiest mortal, Shazam. And the wizard explains some of his powers. He's like, here's the thing. You're transformed. This is your full potential. This is like the best that you can be. And you're now inheriting my chair on the Wizards Council, which is just you. And you have the power of living lightning. You can fly. You have strength. And he's like, I have strength. And he just like immediately breaks one of the thrones. And he's like, oh, that's sick. And he's like, dude, stop messing around, okay? Look, here's the thing. You have to beat Black Adam. All right, you're the only one who has the strength to do it, or else he will take over everything, and he will kill you to get your magic. And Billy's like, I'm sorry, hold on, back up, what? But at that point, the wizard's starting to grow weak, and he tells him one last little cryptic thing of, family is not what it can be, is what it can be, not what it should be. That is your secret spell, your ultimate power. And at that point, he says, you are Shazam, Billy Batson, you are the champion. And he just collapses down into a pile of dust. And Billy is transported back right to where he left Freddie in the bushes. And when he shows up, Freddie's freaking out. He's like, geez, what are you? And Billy takes a second and convinces him, like, dude, it's me. I'm Billy. I got superpowers. And Freddie's like, oh my God, that's sick. And immediately Billy shows off just by lifting a car over his head. And it's the douchey guy's car. And so he immediately just like crashes it and throws it down onto the ground. And the guy's like, my car, what happened? And we see Billy and Freddie just running down the street laughing, figuring out that he does have lightning powers as they short out some nearby Christmas lights. And as they figure out like the first thing that they should be doing, they see a woman getting mugged nearby. And immediately Billy's like, okay, let's do this. And he goes over to the guy and he's like, hey, leave her alone. And he just backhands him, which sends him immediately flying like purely horizontally into a car. And he's like, oh, geez, I didn't mean to hit him that hard. Whoops. And so then the woman's like, oh my God, who are you? And he's like, I am just an adult. Just some guy. And the woman's like, well, how can I ever thank you? And he's like, I'm a bit short on cash right now. And so she gives him a $20 bill, and he's like, nice, and just walks off back to Freddie. And he's like, Freddie, dude, I saved that girl. and she gave me like $20. Do you know what this means? We're going to be rich. And that's where it leaves off. Is they're immediately being selfish with their powers. I mean, this is the whole Shazam story up till now has been great. This is truly, it makes sense that this isn't a zero issue. This is truly like the origin of Shazam itself. Solid art. I mean, Gary Frank can really do no wrong here. It looks great throughout. Story-wise, did a good job of explaining, like, okay, here's Shazam, and here's how his powers work, and here's some basic stuff, while also setting up mysteries of, like, the 7 deadly sins and whatnot. So I'm down for it. I really do enjoy this issue as a whole. It's going to be a little bit crappy going back to smaller backups after this, but I definitely enjoyed the zero issues. So overall, I'd say that this gets like an 8.5. This is really, really good. You know what? No, I'm going to give it a 9. I'm going to go up that high because this is the defining moment for Shazam moving forward. Even in like future movies and stuff like that, this is how Shazam's origin is remembered. It really defines the character. So very good. Definitely worth checking out. Wonder Woman number 0, written by Brian Azzarello, art by Cliff Chiang. I don't know what to make of this issue. Not in plot, but on the first page there is a caption box that says, monthly monster strikes again. Rather than give Wonder Woman's merry men their marching orders, blah, blah, blah. May you enjoy this magnificent missive that originally appeared in All Girl Adventure Tales for Men number 41. I don't know if they're serious or not. I couldn't find anything about it. So anyway, this issue picks up with a young Diana climbing up to a harpy's nest that's on a cliff. The harpy starts attacking her, but she manages to steal an egg from it. And the whole reason that she's trying to steal an egg as she swims down into an underwater cave is that it is Queen Hippolyta's birthday. And, it is Diana's birthday, and it is custom that Diana has to give Hippolyta a gift that is amazing. And so they're like, well, all I got was a harpy's egg, bitch. And everyone's like, yay, Diana, hooray. So we see a mysterious, shadowy figure looking on, saying, maybe this girl could be useful. So later on, we see at the, I guess, birthday festivities, a young Amazon called Alika is having a little sparring duel with wooden swords with Diana. And Alika's like, yeah, I'm actually going to mess you up, Diana. And at that point, Diana's like, okay, but like, I can't let you do that. So she just gets the sword out of Alika's hand and knocks her down on her ass. And Alika's so pissed off by this, she calls Wonder Woman clay and throws mud in her eye, to which Diana starts like choking Alika out. She has to be pulled off her by Diana, which, upsets, or pulled off her by Hippolyta, which upsets Diana. So Diana like runs away crying, and she is greeted by the god of war, Ares. And Diana's like, oh, geez, hey, Ares, what do you want? And he's like, here's the thing. You have a lot of skill. I saw you fighting. Maybe you should let me train you, because I can teach you stuff that Amazons couldn't. And she's like, that sounds great. Let's do it. So over the course of the next year, every full moon, they got to training. And Ares is like, hey, you're pretty cool. And Diana's like, thanks, you're pretty cool too. And the entire time, Diana's getting better and better at her Amazonian stuff as well. She's not letting one side falter for the other. She's just becoming an all-around better, well-rounded person. Until finally a year has passed, and they are going to celebrate Diana's birthday. But Diana says, like, nah, I want to use actual real swords. And Ares is like, no, because if you're going to use a real sword, you need to be ready for a real fight. And she's like, I'm ready. And he's like, okay, fine. So full moon comes up, and Ares is like, you want a real fight? We fight to the death. And he's like, I don't want to kill you. And it's just like, you want a real sword? That's what that means. So for hours they fight, and in the end, Diana manages to get Ares' sword away from him, but then he uses his own wits to get Diana pressed down with her own sword to her neck. And Diana's like, all right, well, I'm ready to die by your hands. And Ares is like, no, you don't. War means fighting to the death. You do not just accept it. You constantly fight it. But you're not going to die tonight. It's okay. So at this point, he points out to her, like, okay, you want to go get a good gift for Hippolyta. Over there is something that would be the greatest tribute of all time. Go in there and get it. And she crawls inside this little cave, and she's like, I'll make you proud, War. And he's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So she goes inside, and it turns out that she is in the labyrinth. Somehow she is in the same labyrinth as the Minotaur, and the Minotaur comes across her, and immediately a fight breaks out. Diana, she thinks that she's hopelessly outmatched. She doesn't have any weapon that can take it down, especially in combat, but she uses her wits. As she brought along a rope to keep her track in the labyrinth, she uses the rope as a lasso to knock the Minotaur down on his feet, and then she's like, okay, I got some breathing room, what now? And she remembers the whole Ares thing of using your opponent's weapon against them. So as the Minotaur charges against Diana, she very quickly moves out of the way of the Minotaur, causing it to hit its head on the wall and get stunned for a second, long enough for Diana to come up and smash a giant rock over its head. Not killing it, but knocking it out. And then at this point, Ares comes in and just be like, hey, good job. That's the tribute. You get to take the Minotaur's head. So she throws her a sword and says, go ahead, cut off his head. And she's about to, but then the Minotaur wakes up and opens its eyes and looks all scared. And Diana's like, I can't do it. I can't kill this thing. And Ares is like, are you kidding me? No, yeah, no, I spared you, but, well, he didn't say that. He's like, no, all of purpose of war is to end conflict. If you leave him alive, he can get revenge on you. And that's not the purpose of it. You have to kill him. And Diana's like, well, you let me go. And he's like, okay, you know what? No, screw this. I curse you. You are my greatest failure. You are a failure of a student. How dare you? And then he just leaves Diana with the Minotaur. And the Minotaur gets up and she thinks all right, well, I guess I'm going to die now. But the Minotaur looks at her seemingly out of respect and is just like, okay, all right, well, that's something. And the Minotaur just lets her go. And as she follows her lasso back out of the labyrinth, she comes back to Themyscira and she's like, okay, well, I don't know what I can give my gift for Hippolyta. I guess I can show her my mercy. Yeah, that's a good gift. The end. If this was a reprint of an earlier story or something like that, I mean, it fits perfectly with the story that they're doing now. But it was just that first caption threw me off for the entire rest of the story. I was just waiting for it to be something out of continuity or something that didn't make any sense. But it constantly was just yeah, no, that's pretty much exactly the same. So I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe they were just being cheeky. It just threw me off. It does have Brian Azzarello credited in this issue as Brian Kiss My Azzarello. So there's that. Overall, though, it was a good issue. It was just a Wonder Woman training story, and then throwing in a little bit of her morals and how she came to be in that regard. So overall, I'd say this issue is definitely a solid 7.5. It just, I really want to know the backstory on that first caption box because it's throwing me for a loop, man. Blue Beetle number 0, written by Tony Bedard and Keith Giffen, art by Ig Guara. This is the origin of the scarab itself, Kajida, and we open up on Reach World a long time ago, where this weird being, I don't know if he has a name, he's just a designer, where he discovered basically the scarab, the actual creature. He managed to commandeer it and turn it into something that would be able to further the reach of the Reach. And they're like, okay, cool. Show us what you got. And he's like, oh, I call it Kajida. And he's like, it has a name. And he's like, it's sentient. It's living. But it will work for us. And it bonds to any sort of bioorganic host and takes over the planet using its knowledge of defenses of the planet. And they're like, cool, all right, test it out. So they fire it off into space, and it arrives at a planet with a whole lot of dark matter around it, and immediately it sinks onto a planet ship-looking thing that has this small child on there that's ripping the arms off of her dolls. And immediately the scarab comes in, and because it's a ship, it actually breaks open into the vacuum of space, it's causing a hull breach, and all the adults on the ship start reacting to the alarm going off, but the the kid itself starts having the scarab bond to it. But in the moment that it's doing so, the reason that the scarab was attracted to this child rather than the adults, is because this child had extreme potential for psionic energy, like having a psychic ability. So as it tried to bond to her, the girl was able to weaponize the dark matter that was in the area and use it to pry the scarab off of her before it could be fully bonded. And it turned, and like they were holding on to the scarab, and she turned to the scarab and was just like, "Oh, you're gonna get punished. I'm gonna pull your legs off." And so immediately the scarab was like, "All right, I'm in over my head," and it used all of its energy to just basically explode out and just get out of there. And all the adults come in and look at the girl and see all these weird dark matter beings around her, and the girl's like, "Oh, don't worry, they're mine. They're my puppets, and I'm gonna make sure that they do whatever I want them to do." And it turns out this was a backdoor origin story for a character called Lady Styx. I don't know her. I don't think we've met her, but she clearly has some bad juju about her. So anyway, they bring back the scarab, they do some repairs, and they send it back out again, and it immediately faces down against a Green Lantern, which we saw, I believe, in the Zero issue, and just knocked it out. And it was thrown into hyperspace, where it ended up crashing down on Earth in a Mayan civilization. However, this is where we get the extra stuff. There was a Mayan priest named Sky Witness who saw the scarab come down, and he touched it. The scarab bonded to him, but because the scarab was so damaged, it wasn't able to control Sky Witness at all. It just gave him the power set. So he's like, "Hey, everybody, the gods have answered our prayers, and we will stop the invaders that are coming to our land." And the invaders, they had a name. I'll get to it. The Nahua. They were coming in, they were invading all these Mayan tribes, and the next time that they tried, Sky Witness came in with his superpowers, and they were all scared off and sent far away from the Mayan Empire to what was basically Mexico City nowadays. And in time, they developed their own culture, and it turns out that the god Quetzalcoatl, when they became the Incans, Quetzalcoatl was based off of how they remembered and how the legends told of Sky Witness. So anyway, even with the scarab's life support ability, it can't keep people alive forever, and Sky Witness is getting to too old of an age, and he basically tells his son, "Hey, look, people are going to want you to have this, but it has nothing to do with this. It's all about the power on the inside, and this is a weapon that people are going to want to use, so it needs to be buried with me. We need to just get rid of it." So he sends his son out of the temple and then brings the temple down upon himself. And in the moment before the temple collapses, Kajida tries to escape. He unbonds from the host, but then the Sky Witness grabs hold of Kajida, and so Kajida sends out a beacon in order to get teleported back to the Reach homeworld, and the teleport comes in, but because of the extended exposure to it, they think that Sky Witness is the Reach tech, so he gets teleported back, and Kajida is left in the rubble for thousands of years. Eventually, he's discovered by a gravedigger who then sells it on the black market. It trades hands a couple times. Each time there's a legend of it having untold power, until finally it ends up in the story that we've already seen, and he explains through some of that. What they then explain is the events of Justice League International Annual Number 1, in which OMAC and Blue Beetle meet up, and OMAC basically opens up a portal into deep space and throws Blue Beetle through it. And that's where we are now, with Jaime just floating in deep space saying "Okay, cool. How does that help me here?" And Kajida's like, "You just need to know that I'm special when it comes to other scarabs." And he's like, "All right, why?" He's like, "Oh, it's because you're going to be meeting a few of them in 5 seconds." And then all of a sudden, Jaime is surrounded on all sides by a bunch of different scarabs who are like, "Oh, Kajida, you are a traitor and you must be destroyed." And that's where we leave going into the next arc, I presume. It's so weird to me that they would have this critical plot change of him being sent into deep space in a completely separate story that Blue Beetle had never featured in prior to that issue. That is incredible to me that they just do that. I mean, they explained it here. They did straight up say, and then this happened, and now we're in deep space. But, it's a major shift, and it just happens. So I don't know. It's a little bit jarring to see that actually was canon and is actually happening here with minimal explanation. But I can't say I dislike the issue. I think it's a solid enough thing. It's going to set up future things. I believe it said Sky Witness is actually coming back, so he'll be around, I presume. But overall, yeah, this was a pretty solid issue. I enjoy it. Maybe not. I don't know. I guess I would say it's on par with the other Blue Beetle issues, but for a different reason. Whereas the other ones have a humor to it, this one is just more of I like the lore they're setting up. So overall, I'd say this one gets a solid 7. Decent read overall. Definitely necessary for any Blue Beetle fans, and worth checking out where it goes from there. Legion of Superheroes number 0, written by Paul Levitz, art by Scott Collins. This is the origin of how Brainiac joined the Legion, which is definitely weird because there was the Legion Secret Origin series, which detailed that, which was also written by Paul Levitz, and this seemingly just overwrites it. So, whatever, I guess. We open up with Cosmic Lad, Lightning Lad, and Phantom Girl, all on Colu, which is Brainiac's planet, and they're fighting off a bunch of robotic giant mosquito fly things, and they're all seemingly impervious, but eventually the Legion finds a way using Cosmic Lad and Lightning Lad's ability. By the way, if these are not their names, I don't care. And at that point, Phantom Girl's just looking around being like, okay, well, I'll do recon, I guess. And then also Ultra Boy, Man, Lad, Dude, whatever, he shows up. I still don't know why in the trade paperback versions they strip out the names of these people. They are in there in the single issues. I know, because that's how I read them for the show, but they're gone when I'm trying to look at them here. Regardless, he starts beating up all the flies as well, and we see a little snapshot of how he has to switch between his powers very quickly. So, meanwhile, we see that they finally managed to beat through all the flies, protect all the people, and there's mass destruction on Colu, but not like that many casualties. And Brainiac 5 shows up with a bunch of elder Coluans, and it's just like, there, see? They defeated them precisely as predicted. And the Coluans are like, hey, Legionnaires, wish you would have shown up sooner. We have a lot of devastation here. So here's the deal. Over there on our planet, we have a original thing that belonged to the first Brainiac, and it just showed up, and it's currently unlocked, which usually it is locked, and therefore we don't have to worry about people getting into it, but like now it's open and it's causing mayhem, so we need your help in getting rid of it because there's dangerous tech in there. And then we see some weird like thief guy who managed to sneak his way in there, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna get some good stuff in here. But before he can get to anything, he's defeated by what seem to be Brainiac drones who disintegrate him. But then they stop disintegrating him, reverse it, give him a specific weapon, and then say, okay, go on your way, as he's being like mind controlled by Brainiac. So that doesn't ever really come back as far as I can tell. Meanwhile, there's this weird egg-looking thing that's approaching a building that a bunch of Coluans are protecting. They don't have any actual proper weapons. They just have things for, like, gardening and construction, but they're doing their best. And at that point, the egg thing launches an attack at the building itself that they're trying to protect. And it turns out they're trying to protect this building because there is a child inside. Because they are a very long-lived species, they don't procreate very frequently, and this child is the most recent child since Brainiac 5. So the Legion shows up, they smash the egg thing to bits, and they're like, oh no, but it attacked the building. We have to find out if the baby's okay. Phantom Girl tries having a conversation with Brainiac 5 about joining the Legion, being like, hey, you're doing a lot of super heroics right now. Maybe you'd be good for the Legion. He's like, later. We'll talk about this later. So they go through the wreckage, they end up finding the child, and they take out the rest of Brainiac's robots that are going around, including a giant robotic centipede. And they're like, okay, that thing, we can't figure out how to lock it, so let's figure out something else. And we can't, like, destroy it without destroying the planet. So they call in Ultra Guy and say, like, hey, Ultra Guy, can you come over and just, like, super strength this thing into outer space? And he's like, worth a shot. And he reaches underneath it, and he just foomps right into outer space, where they can then blast it with heavy artillery safely without damaging the planet. And at that point, Brainiac 5 apparently did join the team. Somewhere along the way, he's like, okay, I'll come with you. And they're all heading back to the Legion headquarters. And Brainiac 5 is like, but I have to wipe my own mind of the memory that I was the one who opened up the secret Brainiac vault before Saturn Girl can read my mind. Click. Okay, done. Hey, guys. And that's it. It's not the worst. I mean, it featured on a small core cast of characters rather than trying to do the breadth of the entire Legion. I'm good with that. It focused on... that's a weird thing, is that it says that it focuses on Brainiac joining the Legion, but honestly, I feel like that is the least significant thing in this entire book. This didn't feel so much as an origin as much as this was set in the past and just so happened to coincide with him joining the Legion. You could have told this story whenever. Yeah, it's not offensively bad, but at the same time, I can't really see much purpose to this book at all, save for if they're trying to set something up with Brainiac. Like, oh, is he actually following in the ways of the original Brainiac? Ooh, but like, I'd have to care for that, and I don't. So, this issue, 5.5, I would personally like to bring it lower, but I do recognize that that's just my bigotry against the Legion as a whole and how it's been represented in the New 52. So if I'm trying to be fair, 5.5. It's not doing anything inherently wrong, but it's not doing anything at all right. Sword of Sorcery number 0, written by Christy Marks, art by Aaron Lopresti. This is a new series featuring Amethyst of Gemworld, and we will get to that by the end of the issue. But first, we open up in a normal American high school with Amy, a chick who doesn't particularly want to fit in. She's got a whole bunch of like dark-haired colors and wearing a leather jacket and whatnot. And she overhears some people nearby planning a party and purposely not inviting her because they think she's so weird. Now she makes her way to her locker. She sees, I guess, her locker mate, the person next to her, is being hit on by someone in the football team. And the girl is admittedly a bit dorky herself. Her name is Beryl. And Amy overhears all this of how they're going to meet up at the bleachers after the homecoming game. And Amy's like, oh, hey, he's on the football team. You going on a date with him? And Beryl's like, oh, yeah, he's so dreamy. And then Beryl's like, oh, yeah, you're the new girl. You're Amy. Hey, I'm Beryl. It's a horrible name. And she's like, yeah, no, it's part of like a topaz thing. I'm all about like rocks and gems and stuff like that. They interest me. And Beryl's like, oh, that's cool. I'll see you at the homecoming game. And she runs off. And then we see her mother working down at the diner. She's only been there for a couple weeks now, but it's apparently her daughter's 17th birthday tonight, and 17 is a very big birthday for them. So she hugs goodbye to her friends at the diner and says like, yeah, we're going back home, and I'm probably not going to be back again, so see ya. So later on that night, they're in their trailer, and Amy is saying like, hey, like, I get it's my birthday, but it doesn't feel that special. I have no friends here. We move like every couple weeks. I've never been able to set down roots. This is not what I wanted. And she's like, don't worry. It's your 17th birthday, and I did promise you I'd send you back home then. However, we need to train again. And they go into the closet, get out some swords and shields and some sparring gear, and just start fighting in the woods. And the mom's like, Amy's distracted. The mom's just like, what are you doing? Come on, focus. Get in the head. What's going on right now? And Amy just throws down the stuff, and it's just like, this sucks. I hate being weird. I just want to fit in like a normal person. And then we cut to Gemworld. It's actually called Nila, but I'm going to call it Gemworld until they explicitly tell me that I can't. And we are greeted by this blonde queen-looking woman who has another blonde woman who looks more like a peasant down on her knees. And she's like, hey, no need to cry. I brought you here because you have my bloodline. And see, when you touch this amethyst, it glows. That's signs that you have the royal bloodline, because here's the deal. A couple of generations ago, my great-grandfather slept around a lot and left his seed all over the countryside, and that's something that I now have to deal with. And then she just vaporizes the young girl and says, like, and like inhales her inherent like gem dust or whatever, and it's just like, okay, well, pay her family and find me another one. And then we end with that scene. So we cut over to Amy, who's arriving after the homecoming game, and she missed the whole thing. However, it is around the time that Barrows said that she'd be behind the bleachers. So we cut to Barrows, who not only is the football guy there, but so are two other football players. And it seems like they're about to do some very unsavory things to her. To which point Amy shows up and tells them, back off. And they start trying to fight Amy. Amy is, of course, able to fight back because of all the training the mom gave her, and literally, like, breaks one of their noses, knocks the other ones out. The one who broke his nose is like, my dad's a lawyer, and we're going to sue you. But when she goes to help Beryl, and it's like, hey, let me get you back home, Beryl's like, get away from me. Jesus, like, what did you do? And she just runs off, and Amy has to call her mom in order to get picked up. So later on, Amy is back home talking to her mom, being like, why was she afraid of me? And she's like, she was just in shock. Don't worry about it. Look, we can go back home now. It's time to finally do it. And so they don't bring anything. They don't bring the trailer. They literally only bring like a water bottle, a granola bar, and the clothes on their back. They even leave their phones, and they just start driving off down to the base of this mountain. They start climbing up the mountain again, and the mom explains, like, look, we got to go really far out here, and the whole reason that I've never taken you home is because we have people back home that want us dead, and not just any people, my sister. To which we then cut over back to the blonde-haired woman who is now in the throne room being like, all right, Day of Prophecy, it's here. I need all my men on high alerts. We're going to go to all the different points that we mapped out. We need to be prepared to strike instantly. And one of her advisors is like, I mean, milady, it is possible that your sister and her daughter had already died. Otherwise, wouldn't they have come back by now? To which point the queen points out that, I'm only at half power magic. You know why I'm at half power magic? Because my sister has the other half, and she's purposely waiting until her daughter turns the proper age to take the throne from me. So shut your trap, you stupid advisor. So then we cut back to Earth, and it's dawn. They make their way out deep into the wilderness, put down what they call a portal crystal down in the ground, and the mom uses some magic to activate it, which causes this huge purple portal to open up. Amy and her mom step through it, and when they come out the other side, they are now in like full armor, and they have long flowing blonde hair, and they look exactly like the queen does. And when they arrive, they have a whole group of soldiers kneeling before them, and they're speaking like a strange language, which the mother is easily able to speak back. And the mother explains, like, yep, okay, you look different, I look different, this is a whole different world, this is our true life, we have magic powers, I'll explain it all in a bit. Also, they speak a different language, we'll deal with that as we get to it. But before they can really do anything, they are ambushed. A couple arrows come in, and the soldiers start trying to protect Amy, and the mom goes deep into the fight. But Amy, she's a fighter. She wants to join in. She grabs one of the soldiers' sword, picks up a shield, and immediately jumps into the fight, saying, I'm coming, Mom. And then we just get one little panel here of John Constantine showing up to where the portal crystal was left, saying, oh, hey, you might be useful later on. Picks it up, puts it in his coat, and whistles his way off screen. Dense first issue, dense 0th issue, I guess. There's a lot going on here, setting up a lot of ideas, concepts, and characters. I'm loving the deep lore of this. Full discretion, I did read this series way back when I first bought this trade. This is one I actually gave a shot to, and I did enjoy it, but I hardly remember any of it now. But it still stands up. It's still a very good intro to this idea of Gem World and these different, as we'll see, these different houses, and there's magics that are all based on the different houses. It's going to be a great read, I guarantee you that. But this first issue is just a solid start to that of, first you get the teen that's relatable, and then you spin it into this weird magic thing. So fish out of water story, set up, prepackaged, ready to go. Overall, gonna give this one an 8. Definitely worth checking out. Follow along for the rest of the issues if you have any interest in it. I'm definitely going to be interested the whole way through. And that's it. That is all the comics that came out from DC Comics this September 19th, 2012. And normally, here's where I'd say something about the comics that came out this week, but I just looked at all the comics that are coming out next week, and there's 16 of them. There are 16 comics coming out next week. I am moving this week, DC. Why are you doing this to me? Why do you test me, Lord? Oh, Jesus. Okay, look, let's just go ahead and talk about those comics so I can start reading them nearly immediately, because I'm not going to have time to at any other point this week. We have the number 0 issues of Batman Incorporated, Batman the Dark Knight, Superman, Red Lanterns, Aquaman, The Flash, The Fury of Firestorm, The Savage Hawkman, All-Star Western, Voodoo, Teen Titans, iVampire, and Justice League Dark. Additionally, we have the number 0 issue of the brand new series Talon, exploring a Court of Owls Talon that didn't want to be a Talon. And we have the number 1 issue of a one-shot, I guess, National Comics Rose and Thorn, continuing the National Comics anthology, this time with Rose and Thorn, which I believe is a Jekyll Hyde thing. And then on top of that, we also have the number 2 issue of Phantom Lady. Seriously, DC, why does that all need to be on this week? Why you gotta do me like that? If you have any reasons why you think they got to do me like that, any thoughts on the comics I talked about this week, or any thoughts at all, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast. That is all one word, at DC Comics Podcast. It's never too late to join in on the show. Additionally, we have a Patreon that you can pay into to get some bonus features from other people. Not me, though. I'm a rebel like that. And that is Mild Fuzz TV. All one word, Mild Fuzz TV. For as low as $1, you can waste $1. That's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching or listening, however much you've been paying attention to this show. Lord knows I need as much caring and love as I can to get through this next week. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.